There's actually an example in there, Blink, which actually does not necessarily blink LEDs because obviously naming is hard. It actually does a Night Rider. But still, it's a nice example. It'll tell you what you need if you want to get started with hacking the badge. So the obvious question is, okay, that's nice, I have an FPGA bitstream now, but how do I get that to the badge? Well, Sylvain has been really nice in that he has written a DFU bootloader, and you enable that in general by holding the middle button while turning the badge on. You will get the screen like you see here, and you can actually use standard DFU utilities to upload bitstreams to the FPGA. Like the standard DFU utility is DFU util, and it comes with the toolchain. So if you install the toolchain, you will have that. So DFU util can actually write 5 different regions. Actually 6 if you hold the secret button, but hey. So you can write to internal memory. You can either overwrite the SoC, in which case if you turn on the badge, it'll immediately run your bitstream. There's the internal RISC-V firmware which you won't use for bitstreams, but you can also write to the cartridge when you have it inserted. So the cartridge has one slot for an FPGA bitstream, so you can actually have something on your cartridge that reconfigures the entire FPGA. It's like if you have a Game Boy, you put a cartridge in it, and it all of a sudden turns into a Sega Genesis or something. So there's also some more regions in there. You don't usually need them. So if you flash a bitstream to your cartridge, it'll actually nicely show up as a menu item. So if you boot up your thing, you can just select it, and as soon as you click on that, your FPGA will get reconfigured, and yeah, you will have the extra SoC features you coded in or whatever. There's also a few make targets in general in the code base that do that. They're called like this. They don't always do the same. Check the make file. Stuff is not documented that well, but you all can read text files, so that's perfectly fine. There's one gotcha there, and that is that after you have run the bitstream, it may look like your badge is broken. The problem is that if you turn, if you have the bitstream running, you usually don't have a way to get back to the old bitstream, so you turn off your badge and you turn it on. I mean, that's logical, right? So what you get then is that it'll restart the same bitstream from the cartridge instead of the main menu. And if you remove the cartridge and you turn it on, then it'll just do nothing. The reason for that is actually that we only found that out like I think yesterday. This is the schematic. This is a simplified version of the schematic that does the switching between the cartridge and the internal flash. So this is a flip-flop that has a clear line. As soon as the D flip-flop gets cleared, the internal flash is selected. The flip-flop gets cleared by a little RC circuit that is supposed to give a low level when the power when power is applied. However, on the badge, seemingly the power doesn't drop down really fast if you have turned off the badge. So it may take powering off the badge for like in 10 seconds, 20 seconds, I haven't measured, but it can be a fairly long time before it reverts to using the internal flash. So that is a gotcha. If you run into that, just leave the badge alone for a while and it will be fine. Okay, so SoC hacking. The default payload for the FPGA is an SoC that we built. The block schematic of the SoC is well. Let's start with this. This is the basic SoC. You've got 2 RISC-V cores. As I said, it's a dual-core badge. The second RISC-V is not used yet. If you want to use it and you write some nice utility functions for that, I would love to see a pull request. And the memory bus is for that, so when you request memory or write to memory or whatever, it goes into an arbiter to make sure that the writes don't cross whatever. And then there's 2 bits of PSRAM, that's the 16 megabytes of main memory, and there's a cache in between to make everything go faster and to make everything go work. So obviously we also have peripherals. They're connected like this to the main memory bus. So there's a main memory bus that has all the reads and writes, and all the peripherals just listen on that for reads and writes more or less. So, oh, and there's actually an arbiter in front of the PSRM as well for the frame buffer, but you can ignore that. So if you want to mess with the SoC, if you want to add stuff, then you probably want to do that on the main memory bus. That's where all the reads and writes are. If you want to poke your device from C, then that is where you should be. So what does that bus look like? Well, it's not always entirely true, because the SoC is kind of a thing that got, let's say, organically developed. But mostly the bus looks like this. You've got 32-bit of address line, you've got 32-bit of data that is read from your peripheral, and you've got 32-bit of data that is written to your peripheral. So whenever a RISC-V wants to read or write from or to you, then it does that by putting the address of your peripheral on the bus and making the valid line high. That indicates that there's a valid read or write on the bus. So how do you know if it's a read or a write? You've got this write enable, well, it's actually a write enable bus. If it's 0, then it's a read, and if it's non-zero, then it's a write. So how do you respond? Well, as soon as valid goes high, the CPU is effectively waiting for you to figure your shit out, get that data on the bus, and it'll wait until you have done that. As soon as you've done that, you're supposed to tell the CPU by raising the ready line for one clock pulse, and then the CPU knows that you're done, will read the data or will accept it as written and continue. So the write enable line is actually 4-bit. That is because this is a 32-bit machine. It's got a 32-bit bus, but you may also want to write within 1 byte at a time. So the write enable bus actually indicates which of the bytes in the word are actually written. So if you only write like 1 byte to address 0, for instance, the write enable line would be 1. If you don't care about bytes being written, you can happily ignore that. You will just write whenever write enable is F, and you will tell the user to, okay, if you write anything else than bytes, then I can't guarantee the result. So that's more or less what that looks like. In general, if you wanna write something, there's this LCD interface that you may be able to use as a template. It's small enough for you to copy paste stuff from, and it's more or less, same. So just as an indication, it's instantiated and connected in SOC.v. That's the main file with all the peripherals in there. It's looking really long and kind of ball of muddy, but hey, that's what you get. For the C programmers, the memory region where you can write to it is defined in DLD script, actually. And finally, there's a bunch of register defines in macdefines.h. So what I'm trying to say, there are like 3 places where you have to connect that. 1 for the Verilog and 2 for the C code. But you'll find that out. If it doesn't work, you forgot a place. Furthermore, there's one error you can run into, and that's this one, where at the end of your compiling or synthesizing the SoC, it'll just error out on you with an error. That's usually because the SoC is pretty timing. It's pretty strict on timing. It runs on 48 megahertz, but sometimes you've dumped so much combinatorial logic in there that it doesn't make that. The problem, however, is that the synthesizing logic uses heuristics. It uses a bit of randomness to find the best place. And sometimes it just picks the wrong randomness and gets stuck in a local optima. If that happens, you can just go to the makefile, tell it to use a different random seed, retry, and with a bit of luck it will work then. There's a bit of mystery around those random seeds. Each of the developers for the FPGAs have their own random seed. I like 42, I think Elliot liked 4009. See what seed works best for you. Okay, C hacking. I want to give you a few pointers about C hacking. There they are. Sorry. So a few things about the operating system, about debugging, about how you interface to the hardware and what hardware you have available. At least I would have, but I forgot to put the last point in the presentation. Oops. So the operating system in this case is called the IPL, which stands for Initial Program Loader. which, as the tradition goes, does way more than just load the initial program, and actually doesn't load the initial program because that's actually inside the IPL. Organically developed. I think I mentioned it before. So, it's an OS, but it's an OS like DOS is an OS. So it doesn't do any multi-threading. If your application runs, your application is the only thing that runs. There's no memory protection. If your application wants to overwrite the IPL, it's free to do so. It'll give you all the stuff you need to shoot yourself in the foot. It does have kernel memory separation. The bottom 1 megabyte of the memory is actually reserved for the IPL, and it can do its stuff there. The top 15 megabytes is all yours. You can dump in there whatever you want. And it has an ELF loader, so it can load applications into memory, it can execute, and as soon as they exit, it can also clean it up, and you'll get the menu again. So, there's a bunch of layers within this operating system. We have a C library that is pretty nice because it's more or less POSIX compliant. We've got a file system layer, so you can actually use mass storage to dump files on there. We've got a flash translation layers because of reasons, and we have a USB stack, and that's all in that 1 megabyte. So, the C library is new-lib, and it's actually pretty damn good. It has a lot of the standard C functions you have. It has mathematical functions as well, but be aware that the RISC-V does not have a mathematical coprocessor. So doing stuff like sine and cosine is pretty damn slow. We actually optimized the mass storage speed in the main menu by making the animation use lookup tables instead of sine and cosine. It sped up transfers that much. You also have a memory allocator, so if you want to have some memory, you can just call malloc and it will give you a chunk of memory. You can allocate up to, well, you can allocate the entire 15 megabytes of memory that's available to applications that way. And because we have a file system, you can also read and write to the files, and you can do that using just the standard Unix, fopen, etc. calls. So if you've ever written a program for, like in Unix or something in C, then you probably know how to read and write from and to files. So because we have files, we also have paths. And it's good to know about them, just so you know where your files are. So we've got internal flash that lives under /int. We've got cartridge files that live under /cart, if you have a cartridge inserted and it's formatted. And finally, we have some files under /dev. What files do we have under /dev? We have a serial port, we have a debugging serial port. I will show the location of that later. If you plug the thing in using USB, you actually get a USB serial port next to the mass storage device as well. You can actually use that. It's a bit janky and it doesn't support everything, but you can use it if you want to print out something and you don't have a USB to serial thing. And finally, there's /dev/console, which actually tries to print out to the screen using one of the tile layers. It's really useful if you just want to print out a string or two as feedback to the user. Like it'll print out like in the default blue on white text that you see in the menu. It kind of depends on the tile set, but read the source code. So these are the only files, and how do I know? Well, they're hard-coded. So, about this debugging connector, it lives here. It's part of the JTAG connector. It's on the back of your badge, near the HDMI connector. This silk screen, thank God, is actually correct. So, these two things are the receive and the transmit. And you can, they're 3.3 volt like everything else with regards to I/O. And it follows like in the standard 11.5200 watt, no parity, 8-bit, one stop, whatever, that. So that's really useful because the debug serial port is the only serial port that will inform you when something goes terribly wrong. Actually not in your badges, because I broke that functionality in the version of IPL that you have on your badges. So if you go and develop C, please update your IPL. But as soon as you have updated IPL, what you get is a fault handler that will catch things like you writing to a null pointer, or you doing an unaligned load or store, or even just doing a wrong instruction. It actually looks like this. You will see this on your serial port. So if you get a flagrant system error, you know that it's not good. And the nice thing about this is that it implements a GDB stub. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you then go to your application directory and you run make GDB, you actually get a full GDB debugger session. So you can inspect variables, you can look at the backtrace, see what instruction went wrong. I think you just can't continue your program. It's like forensic GDB stuff. But like if you want to debug your program crashing, then this can be really useful. Okay. Furthermore, hardware access. As I said, we only have a few files in /dev. We haven't abstracted the hardware any further. I mean, we're not plan line for God's sake. So you're supposed to, as is the tradition, just poke at the hardware directly. Hardware is pretty understandable. Well, I think it's pretty understandable, but I wrote most of it, so. So just read the register documentation, go poke at it. There's actually some documentation in the /doc directory, so the really complicated stuff like the synthesizer and the graphics subsystem actually have a halfway decent explanation in there. If you can't find the manual there, so you can't RTFM, then please WTFM, write the fucking manual. And if you really can't figure out, there's always the register definitions themselves. They are in magnifines.h. Each register definition and each bit actually has a blurb of comments indicating what it does. So, worst case, you can just grab that and see if it has what you need. So, as I said, the hardware documentation is not really complete because, we already ran out of time writing the SOC, and you know what happens to documentation in those cases. So, if you want to write anything, please, a pull request is welcome. I will take a look at the repo every now and then. If I see any same pull requests or additions in peripherals that can be really useful, extra documentation, bugs that are fixed, there are still some bugs in there, whatever, please, file a pull request and I will take a look at them. Same thing if you run into an issue and you think that, hey, someone else may run into this and it would be good if this would be fixed, but I have no idea how. There's an issue list, file an issue, not for sell out. So, I have said about 10% what you need to know about hacking the bash. I hope you'll find out the 90% other percent yourselves. But the last thing I have to say is happy hacking. I think this is a really open badge. You can do a metric fuck ton of shit with that. I have gotten a few ideas myself. I am sure that that half of you will come up with ideas that I haven't thought of yet. So I really look forward to the bash hacking contest to see what everyone did. Okay, that only leaves me with putting the important URLs on there. There's a repo for the FPGA and the C code. There's a repo for the PCB that you can take a look at if you want to know where which trace runs. If you don't want to download the toolchain because it's big and you have a shitty connection, we actually have a bunch of sticks available with the toolchain on it, as well as the actual repo, which is probably perpetually behind. I mean, there's already one commit in there that's one commit in the repo that's not in there, but hey. This is the Hackaday I.O. thing, so if you want to discuss things, go there and chat about it. And I hope you have a fun time.
Great PM, everyone. Amazing work. I think we're going to have a ton of fun with this badge. Who here is taking the Logic Noise, the music workshop with the badge? You need to solder your speakers on before the workshop. So go solder your speakers on. Anybody here would be happy to help you learn how to do that. It's only 2 connections and it doesn't matter which one's which, so it'll be fine. If you're taking any of the FPGA workshops or that music workshop that happens on the badge, please install the tool chains before you get to the workshop. It will, quick charge your ability to do the workshop. Without further ado, have a great Supercon. Thank you.